Good evening, members of the Council. Can I invite members to join me in saying the International Prayer for Peace? Lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our heart, our world, our universe. Can I now invite Councillor David Stanley to lead us in saying the Lord's Prayer?
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thine will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our Please be seated. Yes, thanks. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? I've got Councillor Paul Bradley. Any more?
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Ridalmi.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Any prior declarations of interest made under the Members' Code of Conduct have been published online. Interests previously disclosed by members at meetings are recorded in the minutes in the White Book, which is also published online. All these interests will be taken as read. They are deemed as repeated at this council meeting. I now invite members to declare any additional interests.
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of November 2021 be confirmed as a correct record and signed. Does the Council agree? Thank you. That is carried. Agenda item 4, Mayor's announcements. Members of the Council, you may already be aware that Dudley Council House is being lit up this evening in blue and yellow, the colours of the Ukrainian flag, as a mark of respect and as a show of unity with the people of the Ukraine at this time. Members of the Council, it is my sad duty to report on the recent death of our friend and colleague David Vickers. David served on the Council from 2004 to 6 in Lye and Woollerscote, and then 2008 to 2022 in Halesowin South. During his service, David held the Cabinet positions for Education and Lifelong Learning, Health and Wellbeing, and most recently as the Deputy Leader from 2017-18 onwards. He also previously served as the Chair of the Select Committees on Community Safety and Community Services and Children's Services. Tomorrow, the borough's flag will fly at half-mast to mark the day of David's funeral. This is also the first full council meeting since the death of former councillor Albert Hancon, who passed away in December. Albert served in the Halesowin North Ward from 1986 to 1998 and was the Vice Chair of Housing. Can I invite the Council to join me in observing a minute's silence as a token of respect to their memory? I would now like to invite members to pay individual tributes to David. Councillor Ian Bevan.
Madam Mayor, there are people here that knew David Vickers much longer than I did. Despite this relatively short amount of time, his influence, his way of thinking and the impression he had on me will be with me for life. He was a man for whom I had the greatest respect. He helped and supported me from the moment we met until the days before we lost him. He was absent from these benches for a period of time, and I'm sad he wasn't here to see the bandanas we wore for him. He wasn't sad, Madam Mayor, he was livid that he missed it. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for being such a good sport and letting us wear them, raising hundreds of pounds for your charities. David may not have been here in person, but he was with us in spirit, and I know he's here now grumbling about the fuss. David simply didn't know his worth. Whether he was answering questions, offering advice and counsel, or just engaging in banter, he was always there. The man was a beautiful, selfless, loving and kind individual, and I miss him dearly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Patrick Harley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it's a difficult night for vast majority of members in this room, if not all of us. We normally pay tribute to former colleagues who pass away. It's very rare for us to have to get up and say a few words about colleagues who are in service. So this is particularly very tough for the members on this side of the chamber, and I'm sure David had many friends on the opposition benches too. He was my deputy from the start in 2013. In those 9 years, I can't recall an argument or even a disagreement, no angry words, not with David. His advice was always spot on. If I was going too far, he'd slow me down. If I wasn't going fast enough, he'd speed me up. And as any group leader will know and testify, quite often the hardest part of being a group leader is managing your own side, not the opposition. And if it wasn't for David's help as an absolutely bloody good deputy, I doubt that I would have dug in and stayed in this position. So I owe everything to that man for his support over the last 9 years. And even up until the end, 10 days before his sad passing, he was still there advising and carrying out his duties. And he was immensely proud, Madam Mayor, of what he'd contributed to the Conservative group and to the council. You know, I look around these benches now, it's very different from when we both took that journey as leader and deputy. So diverse, you know, not just white, middle-aged men, lots more women on these benches, a lot more younger people on the benches, people who aren't the usual middle-aged white faces, people who are openly gay and proud about their sexuality. None of that existed in 2013, none of it. Thanks to that man, we dragged this group into the 21st century, and he was immensely proud of that achievement, none more so than some of the inexperienced members at the time, who he put an arm round. His pastoral skills were legendary, Madam Mayor, far better than mine. You know, if someone was ill or struggling, it was David that we sent out to see them and meet them and give them a big boost. But I look at people like Nicola Richards and Simon Phipps and one or two others along this front bench who were blossomed because of that man's pastoral skills, putting an arm around them, tutoring them, giving them guidance, and above all, giving them an opportunity. I went to see him 10 days before his passing, and that was one of his proudest achievements, at allowing people to come through and progress through the group. Even then, just while he must have been in immense pain and having a lot of suffering, he was gladly reminiscing about what achievements he'd had as deputy leader. And finally, Madam Mayor, he was a damn good deputy to me, but he was an even better friend. And I shall miss him immensely. My condolences to his daughter and also to his partner, Andrea, who, I have to say, is extremely brave at coming here tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Damien Caulfield.
Madam Mayor, David was a unique man with a calibre you would spend a lifetime trying to emulate. He was the bricks and mortar in any friendship foundation, who always had time for a chat or to give you advice. When Lynette and I first met David and Andrea some years ago, there was an instant connection that quickly grew into a close friendship. No matter how busy we were in the week, Friday night was bingo night at the Laurels in Colligate, where we met up with Natalie and Chris and James. First on the agenda was cobs and a pint. Then it was down to the business at hand to win. These are priceless memories, Madam Mayor, that we will always treasure. Madam Mayor, I know David is looking down on us here tonight, and I just want to say to him, David, it was an honour to have called you my friend, and I know Lynette will echo my words in saying we were better people for having you in our lives. You fought a sterling fight, and until we meet again, old mate, stand easy. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Caulfield. Councillor Colin Alcock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. David Vickers, I just want to talk about him as a friend and as a colleague. I first met David quite a few years ago in Ayleshowen before he was a councillor. And I know he went on to represent Lyon Woolliscott, as has been mentioned tonight, and eventually Ayleshowen South, with another great friend of mine who will be remembered, Councillor John Woodall. When David was serving in the police, he was a sergeant to a friend and a customer of mine who lives in Penmore still. He was sergeant to her, she was his inspector. Coming more up to date, he supported me well along with many other colleagues. Some of them are here tonight. When I first stood as the candidate in Norton, and I remember it was 8:30 p.m. on the evening of the election when he dropped me off on the evening. He dropped me off at home back in June 2012. We'd been out canvassing, knocking up. Many of you will know that I bake bread and make pies and jam, etc. David always commented on our little WhatsApp group about my bakery and cooking skills, and he made many quips about his likes and dislikes, and it was always fun. It was a bit of fun to send him a picture and to find out what he was going to say. He used to comment about the qualities, and some of his comments were humorous and some of them were quite serious. And I know I enticed him into trying to bake a bit of bread for himself. I'm going to say now I shall miss him as a man, as a friend, and as a great colleague. But I know that we all in this chamber will miss him as a great friend and gentleman. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Alcock. Councillor Zarda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, it's sad to be here tonight seeing an empty chair where we would have seen Councillor Vickers across the road. I first met Councillor Vickers in 2011, having campaigned for Woodside Day Centre, and he had an interest in mental health and I had an interest in mental health. And one of the qualities I remember about Councillor Vickers is his ability to listen without interrupting for as long as you need to talk. And I spoke for a very long time, and he said, can we come back to this? And shortly after, he rang me up to say that he'd reflected on his decision. He was a man of faith and a man with forensic skills, and across the table it was difficult to see him in operation but also refreshing that he didn't lose, up until his last days, his ability to be engaged fully in politics. You couldn't discuss his health with him, despite worrying for him, because he was optimistic all of the time. And I used to start the conversation to say, let's put politics aside, how are you feeling? And then he'd shortly move on to politics, which was my tip from him to move on. Sadly, my last conversation with Councillor Vickers was about Woodside Day Centre as well. And even in that time, he was still in his listening mood. We, as Councillor Harley said, always come to these meetings and 9 times out of 10 talk about colleagues that we've lost who have left the council for some time. There are only a few occasions, and one was recently on this side when we lost a serving member of our group in St James's. And the similarities there is Councillor Roberts didn't talk about her health when she was poorly. And this shows the bravery of politicians who come here fighting on for their residents, irrespective of how they're feeling personally. We will miss him, Madam Mayor. May he rest in peace. On behalf of the group, Andrea, you have our love, thoughts and prayers, and we extend our condolences to his wider family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Taylor.
David was my fellow ward councillor for 14 years, but of course I knew him a lot longer than that, and we became quite close. He was a good friend and a good ally to have as a ward councillor. And of course we did discuss many ward issues, but also discuss personal issues. And David was always ready to listen, as he was with anybody and everyone. And he was always willing not just to listen, but to give advice and help if needed. He was always first in the queue. At our monthly ward surgeries, which we used to have when we had no constituents to deal with, which was quite often in our case, we had plenty of time to discuss any issues, whatever they were. And of course, during that time, we got to know each other very well. He was a person, as I've said, that would always listen and help. And he was especially good with the new councillors, guiding, helping and tutoring them whenever he could. His shoes, Madam Mayor, will be very difficult to fill, if at all possible. David will be sadly and greatly missed by all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Daniel Bevan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. David was a true gentleman. He wasn't just a councillor and a colleague, he was a friend to all of us. When I first met David, he was nothing but welcoming and supportive. He would always put others before himself without fail. David set the standard and he led by example. I've learned a lot from him. We have learned a lot from him. Thank you, David. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Laura Taylor-Childs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't waste any time talking about how amazing David was, because I think we all know that, and he was just fantastic. I just want to express how grateful I am to David. He has been a key part in me standing here today, from encouraging me to run as a councillor, to when I took on the cabinet position, he was covering at the time, and I shadowed him for some time, and he taught me well. He gave me confidence, and he was always an inspiration and a confidant, and I will forever be grateful for him. And if I could be half the councillor that he was, I would be very, very pleased. And for any decisions or anything that I encounter going forwards, I will forever ask myself, what would David do? And if I ask myself that, I can't go too far wrong. Thank you.
Councillor Adam Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As has already been said, it's mercifully rare that we find ourselves paying tribute to a serving member of this council, let alone its deputy leader. But it's an honour, yet an honour with a heavy heart, that I'll say a few words about Councillor David Vickers. Madam Mayor, there exists an innate respect between and amongst serving and retired members of the emergency services in this country. And from the moment I was elected to this council, I felt that respect from Councillor Vickers, an unwritten acknowledgement, a nod, if you like, a connection. And I sincerely hope he felt that respect right back from me. Others who knew David and his career in local politics far better than I did, I'm sure will share their memories. But in terms of David's police service, I understand he began his career with Worcestershire County Police, having trained originally at Brighton-on-Dunsmore in Coventry, and would eventually work within the now Dudley Borough in J Division as a detective in Halesowen. David exuded an inherent and often unnerving calmness, which ex-coppers often do. A wealth of understanding, a dry wit, which only comes when you've heard it all before. A career of supporting people often experiencing the worst time of their lives. All of this undoubtedly made David more equipped to represent those who elected him here to this chamber. I will miss the calm voice of reason, often above party politics, and my thoughts and prayers are with Andrea, David's family and everyone who knew him. Madam Mayor, I'd like to close with a few words often quoted in memory of those who have served as police officers. It doesn't matter when or where, it matters not the danger. We race as though we help a friend when called on by a stranger. And maybe just remind the few, if ill of us they speak, that we are all that stands between the monsters and the weak. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Adam Aston. Councillor Judy Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I'd like to say a few words about Councillor Vickers in my role as Shadow Deputy Leader. Councillor Vickers always had an open door policy when it came to discussing matters relating to our portfolio. However, I have to say, when we did get to speak, the discussions would always drift into the bigger issues of the day, like faith and the meaning of life. Far more interesting, I have to say, than the business in hand. David and I, we did have our political differences, but I found him to be kind and a good listener, and he was always respectful to me. So, once again, my sincerest condolences to Andrea, his family, fellow councillors and former colleagues. And Andrea, may the tributes being paid tonight provide comfort to you in the forthcoming days.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Ruth Buttery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My main memory of David was the time he had for people and his encouragement and advice for me, from my initial selection as a Halesowen councillor to recently as a cabinet member in a role David had served in before. His kindness, compassion and faith shone through in all he did. He had time for people and really, really listened, not just superficially. He quietly and thoughtfully worked with council teams and voluntary groups, never at the forefront, but his impact was truly seen by all. The legacy he leaves behind is a huge one of care for his residents, family, borough and colleagues. In this world where politicians are often not held in high esteem, as the suspicion is they are in it for themselves, David was the genuine article and a true example of a gentleman. Since his death, every person I have spoken to has a personal memory or recollection of an act of kindness or thoughtfulness that David did for them. His legacy is vast and his gifts were unique. I will sorely miss our conversations and his wisdom. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Buttery. Councillor Pete Lowe.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd first like, before I go on to my few words on David Vickers, also like to pay my respects to the family and friends of Alan Hankin, who I didn't know as a sitting councillor, but I did know as a student at Halesowen College, so love and thoughts to also. And also I'd like to use the opportunity, Madam Mayor, to pass the thanks on a difficult time for Steve Griffiths, who I'm sure all of us will recognise has turned up to the council meeting under very difficult personal circumstances. And again, it demonstrates how public service is the absolute start and end of so many people on. And that leads really directly onto the tribute for Dave Vickers. And it's very difficult, personally, to put my thoughts into words, Madam Mayor. I'll start by simply saying 57 votes, because there was a difference between myself and David Sparks back in 2006. One recount, he gracefully accepted defeat as a result of that, and I gracefully sent him a commiserations card following that. But in the 2 years between that event and when he became a councillor, what many people in this chamber won't know is that Dave Vickers remained committed to the people of Lye and Staybridge North. Even though not the elected councillor, he would still turn up to those events within the community and play a really pivotal part. On election day in 2008, because of the relationship we had built in those 2 years, I phoned him at 8:30 on election day. His home was also the agent's room and the election hub, and wished him all the very best. And following his election in 2008, I sent him a congratulations card, as I often do across party for individuals that I think have gone over and above in the work that they do. Madam Mayor, let us be absolutely crystal clear of the legacy that Dave Vickers will leave to each and every one of us. He was a man of deep political principle, but political principle with a small p rather than a big P. His principles were built upon his own experiences, his own life, and what he thought was in the interests of the people that he was elected to serve. He was a man of deep commitment, of religious faith. He knew that me and him disagreed on many of the matters of the day, but he was always courteous, always respectful, and always inclusive. He was the model councillor, Madam Mayor. Now, many of the influences that Dave Vickers made was outside of this council chamber. They were in the corridors outside, the meeting rooms before we would actually meet. It was a couple of words that would tell us exactly where we were. And I want to conclude, Madam Mayor, with regard to the deep impact he had on me. There's only 2 or 3 councillors within this chamber who will know some of the personal issues that I went through when I stood down as leader of the opposition a few years ago. Dave Vickers was one of those. Dave Vickers would periodically phone me. He would phone me to see the best wishes and to see how I was. He didn't do that for patronage, and he didn't do that for anything. He did it because he was a decent human being. He prayed for me, even knowing that my faith base was different. And Dave Vickers' prayers were answered, Madam Mayor. I'll just conclude by saying a little bit of Dave has touched each and every one of us within this council chamber. He may no longer be able to take that seat, but he will be fondly remembered by each and every one of us. His legacy will remain for generations to come. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Sean Keesey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. David and I didn't cross paths that much until more recently. Sedgley and Halesowen South are quite far apart, and we're almost close to that famous independent state that keeps being mentioned. But one thing that David did really struck me and will stay with me, and I think Andrew will remember this conversation from a couple of years ago. Being Mr Irreverent the way I am, when it was all going a bit wrong under Theresa May and Brexit was going nowhere, I suddenly thought, April Fool's Day, haha, wouldn't it be funny to say on the WhatsApp group, oh, that's it, I've had enough. And cue the, haha, very funny, it's April Fool's. David Vickers phoned me that morning to see if I was okay. And he did two things for me then. Number one, he buggered up what I thought was a perfectly good April Fool's joke. But secondly, he proved to me something that I'll always remember, that he was a kind man, a caring man, and a gentleman. Thank you, David. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Neef.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first got to know David about 16 years ago when he was a Lion Woolscote councillor. To share some moments with David, David and I would occasionally talk about and relate to many issues affecting the Lye and Woolscote area. David, wearing many hats during his lifetime, was also a school governor at Rufford Primary. When I joined the governing body there, he was very helpful to me, and as a new governor, we sat on many school committees and worked on several school projects together. Up until the recent illness, whenever I saw David, we would talk and have a chat. David, a friendly chat, a man of integrity, honour, respected, very kind. So I just want to end by saying love and thoughts to his family. David, may you rest in peace. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hanif. Councillor Khurshid Ahmed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. David had many qualities, really excellent qualities, which unfortunately it's very difficult to find in one particular person. You've heard the Chamber already said about his kindness, his caring, his courteous, his respectful. He was courteous and he was very respectful, not just on that side of the Chamber, but also on this side of the Chamber. He made everyone feel special. He would come and talk to you. He would listen to you. And he gave me a lot of support, a lot of confidence. I will miss him, and my condolences to his wider family and Andrea. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ahmed. Councillor Andrea Goddard, please.
Right, I'm going to try and get through this now without crumbling and going on too much, as he'd be saying, stop waffling, wencho. When I first met David at a selection evening many years ago, I was up against a Turner, say no more. I was a lot younger and reduced to tears by the leader of the trio within minutes. After leaving the room, he gave me this great bear hug and told me to get back in there. And don't be beaten by those who are out for themselves. I said I didn't want to, and he brute marched me in and showed and shouted, "Here's the new candidate for Hayley Green and Craig South." And I was petrified. That was the start of a beautiful relationship to come. Once elected, he gave me some advice that still sticks with me, and I have continued to keep at the forefront of my mind. And that was to always respect the officers, in fact all council staff, to work with them and not against them. He also pointed that out about the opposition and told me they're here like you to serve the residents of their ward and borough, even if at times you do get it wrong. Sorry. David was a great advocate for those who are most vulnerable in society and would put his own life on hold at all times, to the point where he would even help finance families with deposits on homes so they could start a better life. That happened a lot. In fact, his allowance from the council practically all went to help others, whether it be a family, a veteran, a child overseas, or something that was for his ward. So Saving the Greenbelt was a fight that David never stood down from. The Leasos and the walled garden was something he had a great passion for. David knew the importance and imperativeness of regeneration, but he also was aware of the impact on local history and green spaces. He knew, though, that there was always a way to protect and wasn't shy to source a solution. I am sure everyone knew what a great man David was. I've heard it tonight. Sadly, he never saw that. Sorry. He didn't see himself as anyone other than your average Joe. I can assure you, he was more than that. He gave his life to service and died in service. And 5 days before he died, he was still emailing and asking me to check up on things. David to me was the true meaning of humble. And his words, in a world full of lies and deceit, fan the flames within and be kind. Thank you.
I call on Councillor Ray Burston.
Mayor, Dave Vickers was my ward colleague in Hales Owen South, fellow councillor, but also, more than anything to me, he was a great friend, a true friend. Much has already been said tonight about, his personal qualities, and it goes without saying that he was an incredibly generous, an incredibly magnanimous man. In many ways, he was perfectly fitted to be the deputy leader of the council. Patrick's fixer, if you like. The man who I imagine Patrick would send along if he needed to broach a difficult subject with the opposition, but a subject on which no doubt he wanted them on side. But also a man he would send along to smooth ruffled feathers on his own side too. Those were qualities that he was tremendously fitted for. And so much of what David Vickers did on this council actually took place out of sight of the newspapers and the media. He was tremendous on that score. He was... I'm tempted to say that, his faith was the basis of that. But actually, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but he did come to faith quite late in life, his Christian faith. He was ordinarily a generous man, an open man. He did so much for charity. That, again, and many times I'd bump into him at our surgeries or something like that, and he'd find he'd been doing something for a charity that I didn't even know he was involved in. That's the kind of guy he was. And that's what makes that even more remarkable is the fact that you look back and remember that he not only suffered personal tragedy in his life, but he was also a police officer for 30 years, the kind of profession that probably brought him face to face, week in, week out, with every manifestation of human evil going. And yet, if anybody could be forgiven a certain bitterness or cynicism, it was Dave Vickers, and yet he had none of it. Towards the end of his life, he was so generous and open. As I said, he was a great personal friend to me. Not just an arm around me, around my shoulder during some of my darkest days in my political career and in my personal life, but also a shoulder to cry on too. He was a tremendous individual, and I, for one, my life has been so much the better because I've known Dave Vickers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burston. Councillor Ian Kettle.
Madam Mayor, I wish to speak on Alan Hankin as well. Do you wish me to speak to both at the same time, or will you have a follow-on? Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, a lot has been said about David tonight, and I agree with virtually everything that's been said. And only recently I phoned him up, and to me, the calibre of the man, at 23:59 in his life, he gave me guidance, encouragement, and told me how to get over the problem I got. And I couldn't get over his control. He knew he was dying. He knew he was getting towards the end. But this man had this remarkable control to me, I would describe him as a rock in the mud, in that he helped everyone and contributed, no matter how difficult or how murky the situation. And I have another lovely memory of David, and for that I shall always thank him, by the way, and his support was well appreciated at the time. And years ago, he was chairman of Health and Wellbeing. And it's a difficult job, a job that takes you in all directions. And David gave it his all, and at the end of the year, he was absolutely shattered. A total commitment to the well-being and the health of the people of Dudley. And that memory will always stick with me. One, how damn difficult the job can be, and two, a man who gave it his all. And in this place, we ask no more of our friends and colleagues, because if you end up totally shattered with giving your all to the people of Dudley, you can't do any more. I remember when David came to Stourbridge, and he fought live, if I remember rightly, with John Donegan, Bulldog, and they were almost like shadows. You know, they were always together. They spent a tremendous amount of time together, but they put an awful lot of work in as well. They worked when no one else worked. They came across the Stourbridge from Halesowen and worked in Lye, day in, day out, and they got the result on the day. And that was the day we had 3 out of 3, by the way. Do you remember? Thank you. Okay. So I shall always have that tremendous respect for David. And although his life was touched with sadness and tragedy, he got through it with a huge humility and humanity, and he'll be greatly missed. With that, Madam Mayor, if I may, I'll turn to Alan Hankin. There are probably few in this room tonight, this chamber, who remember the Hankin clan. And Alan was part of the Hankin clan. And one day I was helping out in Halesowen North, and I went down the street, and unbeknown to me, I walked into their headquarters. And it was like a military campaign. The three of them were walking, because he'd got a cousin as well, if I remember rightly. There were 2 brothers, Alan, Albert, and the cousin who were involved in Halesowen North. And I think they all worked at the Austin as well. But they were dedicated to a political lifestyle. Honestly, Pete, I promise you. And they worked for the people in that area, day in and day out, for many years. And I shall never forget the respect I had when I withdrew from that room and saw the amount of work they put in to running a campaign. And there's probably no one else does anything like it, to be honest with you. But I've never forgotten it. So, although it's long since forgotten, and he's been gone for many years, I always have that respect for the Hankin clan, and Albert was one of those. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Kettle. Councillor Mike Evans, please.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the Chamber, David was a very quiet, private and professional man who worked extremely hard in putting the well-being and the protection of the residents of his ward first. We, the Conservative Party in Dudley, will miss the professionalism, the professional way in which he carried out his duties as Deputy Leader, a position he always carried out with pride, enthusiasm and dedication. His support to the leader of the group and the people of Dudley and the officers of the authority will always be remembered with deep affection and pride. He will be sadly missed by all the people who knew him, worked with him and classed him as their friend. During his illness, I had the privilege of talking to David on many occasions. David never once complained about his illness and always found time to thank you for ringing him. That was the sort of person David was. My sincere condolences go to his family, his loved ones. So David, rest in peace and God watch over you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Rebecca Collins.
I first met David around 3 years ago in this chamber, following an honours seminar that I was attending as a school governor. And conversation quickly turned to how I was going to stand and, you know, how are you finding the whole campaigning thing? Is it tiring? Any worries? Yeah, how am I going to get up and talk in front of people? Well, Beck, you're going to stand up, you're going to open your mouth and your words are going to come out. Thanks for that, David. It worked. Fast forwarding to 2 years, almost to the day, David came to me during a very difficult time in my life and offered me his life experience to help me through quite possibly the worst thing that a parent and a mother could ever go through. And it's thanks to David that I am standing here today, able to put his advice and his experience to use to help myself and others. And I will never forget the care that David gave to me. Following that conversation, he asked me what was important to me, what was important to my family, and what I needed to do going forward to make the experience that I was going through as comfortable as possible. And I can honestly say that without David's care, I would probably not be standing here in the shape that I am today. So thank you, David, because of your love and support and advice. You have helped shape me into the councillor that I am here as today, and that I hope to continue to be for some time going forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Collins. Councillor Simon Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't think I was going to actually say anything in tribute because I didn't really feel that I would be able to put into words just how much he meant to me, and in particular the way in which he supported myself and so many other younger members, new members, and actually, you know, it's been said, and that last tribute as well is complete testament towards the man that he was. He was like a tidal wave of compassion if ever there was, you know, any issues that he was aware of that was going on, and he always used to check in, make sure we was okay. He used to tell me constantly I needed to slow down, and whilst I never listened to him, I know he was right deep down. And one of the things that actually I learnt a lot from David was one of his qualities, which has been alluded to but not mentioned specifically, and that's loyalty. Complete and unwavering loyalty towards the leader of the group, towards members, both sides, officers, the council, the people in Halsowing South. I learnt a lot from seeing various occasions where David demonstrated that loyalty. And it's one thing that, you know, I hope that I'll be able to retain, because actually that's a quality which we need to have more of, particularly in the field that we're in. So really I can't say anything else, but thank you very much, David, and I'm so desperately sorry for all of his family, and I really do thank him for everything he did for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Phil Atkins, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a new member, I haven't spent as much time as I would have liked with David, and that is absolutely my loss. Listening tonight, though, to all these beautiful stories and tributes, a quote comes to me. I forget who said it, but it's, "By the time I die, I wanted to have mattered that I lived." And listening tonight, it's abundantly clear that with David and his life of public service, it absolutely did matter. So my sympathies go out to his families as well. Thank you very much.
Councillor Atkins. Councillor Steve Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm finding this personally very difficult to get up and talk to you today. David was the father of our group. And one of the first times I sat opposite the fierce Pete Lowe and David Sparks, I was really nervous. You guys were, especially David Sparks at the time, his reputation went before him. And I was in opposition. And David knew how concerned, how worried I was coming up against you two. And just as we got outside, he put his hand on my shoulder. He says, "You'll be fine. You'll be fine." And I did it, and I got through it, and I managed to actually do the job. But when I sat down, he put his hand on my knee, and he said, "Well done, Steve. You were great. And may he rest in peace." Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And as we draw to the end of the tributes, and I would just like to pay my short tribute to a man that on a number of occasions I crossed swords with, and we don't always agree with everything with our colleagues, but we always apologised and found each other and made well. I've got to echo what Pete Lowe says about politics with a small p, because David really, and I hope I don't offend anyone with this statement, but it's quite well known that David really did not have a political bone in his body. He was a member of the Conservative Party, but David didn't care how people voted. In fact, like many of us, he helped many people who probably never even set foot in a polling station. He was a wonderful, wonderful, caring man. And I remember over 20 years ago meeting that wonderful, caring man with Bulldog. And let's face it, who can ever forget Bulldog? And Dave's sense of humour, his dry sense of humour, his face used to just say it all. He had a wonderful long ponytail, if you remember, back in the day. He kept growing that hair because he wanted to cut it off in the end for charity to support, what had happened with his youngster. And he had a lot of tragedy in his life, and he was a man of very few words. He wasn't afraid of death, from all accounts. My colleagues have informed me. His faith kept him strong. He arranged his own funeral. I hope now that David is lying safe in the arms of the Lord that he so loved. One of the things that I need to say as well, which always touched me and has not been touched upon tonight, that David was a peacemaker. And whenever he sent out emails or we got meetings, he'd always say, "Come on, folks." It was always folks. "Come on, folks, let's do this, folks." And sadly, it reminded me of the ending of the Warner Brothers cartoons. And I'm just going to say, and I hope you will follow with me after this, to give that wonderful man, who didn't like being stuffy, a round of applause, as I say, in the words of the Warner Brother cartoon, "That's all, folks." Thank you, colleagues. I can now move on to agenda item 5, petition for debate, charges for green waste collection and improve recycling facilities in Dudley. Under the provisions of the petition scheme, a petition for debate has been received containing over 3,000 signatures. Can I welcome the petition organiser, Kat Eccles, to the meeting? The petition organiser, now has the opportunity to address the Council on the subject of the petition for a maximum of 3 minutes.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I'm here to present our petition for debate, which gained over 3,000 signatures of people who were opposed to being charged for green waste collections. We're pleased to hear that the Council had reconsidered charging for green garden waste collections, but it is still unclear what will happen after the next season. Will green waste collections remain free in the future for Dudley Borough residents? The petition also called for an improved recycling offer in the borough by providing a wider range of items that can be recycled from the curbside. For example, yoghurt pots, different types of plastic, food waste, and the possibility of a move to split bins rather than the flimsy bags which are very unpopular with residents. Recycling rates in the Dudley Borough are currently 36.9%, putting us in the lower quartile nationally. And while recycling rates are on a par with Dudley's neighbouring boroughs, this shouldn't mean that we don't try to be better. A number of demographic variables affect recycling rates, and more needs to be done to encourage residents to recycle as much as possible and make it really simple. This administration needs to work with the Council's waste transformation team to achieve their goals and make the borough greener and cleaner. Thirdly, and most importantly, the petition called for access to be regained for Dudley residents at Anchor Lane Waste Disposal Site. It is not acceptable to expect people to travel miles to the Stourbridge facility and at the same time complain about fly tipping in the borough. We need to make it easy for people to recycle and dispose of waste. This council needs to work with Wolverhampton Council to ensure the best service for all residents and to reduce the incidence of fly tipping. I hope that allowance has been made in this year's budget to accommodate for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Meet you, by the way. I've seen you on social media and I've never met you in person. Right, thank you. The matter is now open for debate by members of the council, and the first name I've got up out is Councillor Adam Davies, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say I actually agree with much of what tonight's speaker on the petition has said. I too want to see green waste collections in our borough protected, and I know that all colleagues on this side of the chamber do too, and that's why we're glad that this administration managed to secure extra funding from central government to make sure that was possible. I too like the idea of a single bin for all recycling. Who doesn't want a simple life? And that one bin would make things more simple. And I also do think, where practical, it's good to have waste management sites within a certain distance of people's homes. But if only it was all that simple. And that's perhaps where we've got to look a bit more deeply, and perhaps we might differ in recognising the costs and even the unintended consequences of some of the proposed measures that have been suggested. From a financial point of view, it's worth pointing out that when this petition was submitted by the Labour group, sadly with a lot of political intent, they knew full well that this council would not be charging for the standard green bin collections. The reason being, again, that this side of the chamber, this Conservative administration, managed to secure £1.7 million of extra funding from central government. Now, the national finances are tight. We all know this, and members in this chamber know that local finances are tight too. So when we call for policies, I think it's important that policies such as an extra bin being introduced into the system, that we all have a responsibility to consider the financial implications of that policy. From an environmental point of view, when we look at the facts, and the spokesperson did actually point out Dudley's record at 36.9% of waste in Dudley Borough being recycled, when you actually compare this locally to other boroughs that already have a single bin commingled system, we actually perform better than any borough. So we've got Wolverhampton, who, well, we're on 36.9%, Wolverhampton are on 35.3%, Walsall on 32.2%, Sandwell on 30.6%, and it goes as low as Birmingham on 22.5%. So again, Dudley outperforms all other local boroughs on our environmental record of recycling more. And back onto the costs, of course, if we were to have a new bin, There'd be the cost of equipping each household in the borough with that bin. There'd be the cost of new vehicles to accommodate the new bins. And of course, then there'd be time and money spent to train staff and make sure they're adapted to the new system. So of course, none of this would be cheap. And I'm glad that this administration won't jump on policy routes without a proper strategy for this. And that's why I'm pleased that the Cabinet member has confirmed that a new waste management strategy is being worked on. And I hope, Madam Mayor, that this will mean in Dudley we carry on to deliver one of, if not the most reliable, best value and yes, most environmentally waste collection services in the Black Country and wider area.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Ian Bevan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's start at the beginning with this. The petition presented this evening is entitled Charges for Green Waste Collection and Improve Recycling Facilities in Dudley. First of all, Madam Mayor, what charges for green waste collection? There are no charges for the regular service. The only charges for green waste collection are optional extra ones brought in by my colleague, Councillor Shakespeare, and what excellent value for money they are too. It wasn't that long ago, Madam Mayor, that a proposal was brought to full council to charge for this very service. That proposal came from colleagues on this side of the chamber, the side that is now presenting this petition. You simply cannot make this up. Not only did Labour want to charge residents for this service, they also wanted to shift bin collections to a fortnightly collection. Even UKIP thought it was a bad idea, Madam Mayor. And now here they are with a petition for a service that hasn't changed since it was introduced and remains a free service for our residents. It's either a good idea or it isn't. And before the opposition get too caught up in their own hype and carried away, believing that they had the slightest thing to do with there being no charge for green waste collection in Dudley, let's examine the facts. The government settlement, which was better than expected, was also later than expected. This extra money from the Conservative government was ploughed straight back into protecting the very service that Labour tried to take away. This administration, Madam Mayor, will not subject residents to extra costs when it is avoidable. In the excitement to make some political noise over here, I feel the real issue, the underlying issue, is being overlooked. Whilst the green waste collection is free at the point of service, it has to be paid for. A strange concept, Madam Mayor, to some in the chamber, and it's expensive. Had this petition been presented this evening asking for the council to encourage more home composting, then I would have been far less scathing and maybe even overlooked the faux pas of petitioning against something one had not that long ago proposed. Madam Mayor, collecting green waste, which has practically no resale value, is an expensive business and in a lot of instances wholly avoidable. People can be more environmentally friendly. At home, Madam Mayor, we have 2 compost bins and our green waste goes there, along with vegetable peelings, eggshells and other bits and bobs. Nature takes hold of that process for me. I don't need a specific skill or a large wallet. I stir it up a bit with a garden fork from time to time, and I'm rewarded with a rich compost of a far higher quality than you can buy, and I know what went into it. This is the real area to work on, Madam Mayor, where people can make a difference, not just making noise for political gratification. Let's turn now to improving facilities in Dudley. What does this mean? Residents have recycling bags. They keep these where they choose. They're now larger than they used to be. There's no limit on the number they can have, and despite what the petitioner said, the scheme is popular. Plastic is sorted at the curbside, with high-quality plastic removed. Low-quality plastic is incinerated with black bag rubbish and generates electricity, which is sold back to the grid. The chances of low-quality plastic from Dudley ending up in landfills abroad is low. Is there any evidence, Madam Mayor, to suggest that extra bins for residents to sort rubbish actually increases recycling rates? I'm sensing just a little bit of bin envy here. Let's have a look outside Dudley for a moment and see if the grass really is greener. The latest figures show Wolverhampton, 35.3%. Walsall, where there's also a colourful selection of bins, 32.2%. Sandwell, another range of bins in different colours, 30.6%. And Birmingham, where rubbish collection is always in the news, 22.5%. Worst in the region and fourth from bottom nationally. Dudley has a recycling rate of 36.9%, better than all those authorities. Room for improvement, Madam Mayor? I think so. I'm pleased to see a significant amount of interest from the public. However, the petitioner has fronted this with a party political campaign which is staggering in its lack of awareness, given it was her colleagues that proposed a charge for the green waste collection just a few years ago. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Good. Councillor Simon Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the petitioner for coming and presenting the petition to us this evening. I was slightly surprised to read that it would be Miss Eccles that was presenting tonight, because the original lead petitioner was actually one Andrew Tromans, and I presume he's now been swapped out from the Labour group. So thank you anyway for coming along. That wasn't the main surprise, actually, that I had when I was looking at the petitioner. It's because the lead petitioner who presented to us tonight, her opinion has changed absolutely staggeringly in just such a short period of time. And this can be demonstrated by reviewing some social media posts from Miss Eccles from several months ago when all this first came about in the news. So on Facebook, Miss Eccles claimed that the free garden waste service wasn't fair because many residents who don't have gardens were paying for a service for others to use. She expressed her surprise that charging for green waste hadn't been done earlier, and I quote, "Every other authority charges for green bins," before telling other Facebook users to get a compost bin. So, forgive me for being slightly surprised by the presentation. I won't dwell on the overtly party political element too much longer, though, but I will say that clearly the presentation that we've had from a Labour candidate is a case of selective amnesia, as is the opposition spokesperson on this particular issue, because I would remind him that the laughable claims that somehow he's fought off garden waste charges is quite entertaining, given it was his former ward colleague that presented the proposal to charge for green waste and to scrap weekly bin collections. You might forget that that happened, but it was indeed former councillor Hilary Bills that presented that. So, anyway, moving on from the clearly overly party political element of the petition, to which I have responded, I want to actually discuss some real substantive points about the issue, because there's a lot of residents who have signed this petition very honestly and would also want us to debate the actual issues that are at hand. So, recycling rates in Dudley are okay. I won't recycle the stats that have already been mentioned, but, thank you very much, but there is indeed a difference between authorities that have single bins compared to the bags that we've got. And at the moment, I'm not sold that there is actually any benefit in terms of actual recycling rates to replace our segregated recycling with a single bin. The reason being is because the stats don't lie, our neighbours don't do any better than we do, and the quality of our recycled waste is far better than those that throw everything in a single bin. So actually, when I'm considering this not just on a financial point of view of replacing everything, but also on a basic environmental point of view, I think it's really important that we are honest with people in saying, OK, it's not quite as convenient, but you do have much better recycled waste at the end of it. OK, yes, there'd be less wind-related issues in the storms that we've had recently, but there is still that benefit to segregating. And then actually on the issue of green waste, which was the main point of the petition, I want to mention actually, pose a question, how sustainable really is collecting green waste? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that the service is remaining free, and I'm happy that the service is there, but collecting green waste is not in any way a very environmentally sustainable thing to do. You've got to actually collect that waste, and then you've got to dispose of it, when in actual fact you could do what the lead petitioner suggested and composting your waste. That should be something that we should try and encourage a lot more of, because actually it will help to stop the need to be able to dispose of all that waste. So really, I think we do need to have a proper grown-up discussion of the future of these services, because otherwise we will be going around in a very overtly party political fashion, like, you know, I played up to at the start of this speech. But there are some really, really important things that we do need to consider, and that is something that needs to be a discussion that we do as grown-ups across party and with our local residents to work out exactly what is the best way of sustainably collecting our waste in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I think it's called commingling. Councillor Shakespeare. Steve.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, can I thank everyone for engaging in local democracy by signing the petition that was presented this evening. Most people in politics will know that at budget time you always have to discuss priority areas, pressures on existing services, and consider things that are always not quite as palatable as we would like. However, the one and only time which has already been mentioned, that a proposal has been put forward in this chamber to charge for green waste was in 2016. I put the notice of motion forward, so I do know that I was against what Labour were proposing. And the charge for green waste was put forward by the Labour group, and the proposal was also to, as has been said, was to move our weekly black bin collection to fortnightly. This was blocked by the combined opposition of every other member in the chamber who were not members of the Labour group. So it's very disingenuous for the Labour group in Dudley and their candidates in the May election to try and claim the moral high ground on core council services that this side of the chamber have always defended. At our budget summit late last year, we looked at our services right across the council. Some were essential and mandatory services, some were not, and as an administration we looked at what funding we could expect to receive from government and how we could continue to fund these services. This is something that takes place every year. Right on Christmas, as an early Christmas present for us, we were delighted when the government settlement came through, and it was far better than we expected. As a result of this late government settlement, I am delighted that we were able to publish in early January this year that we would continue to provide to over 115,000 residents their free 16 fortnightly green waste collection, something that we had done when we first introduced this service. In addition to our residents receiving 16 free fortnightly collections again this year, we were also offering a chargeable opt-in service for an additional 6 collections, 3 when the free collections finish in November and 3 in spring before the new free collections start again next year. This is something we trialled at the end of last year and was very well received. Madam Mayor, we continue to work on our new waste strategy for Dudley, looking at all areas of waste, and also await the outcome of the government's waste strategy, which has been through many levels of consultation. I know the latest published recycling rates, which have already been mentioned, which were for 2021, show us at 36.9%. But if we look at our recycling rates for the first 2 quarters of 21-22, these have increased tremendously to 42.5%, which means we continue to be well ahead of our neighbours in Birmingham, Sandwell, Wolverhampton, Wyre Forest and Walsall. And we continue to have a low landfill figure of around 2%, which we still continue to be amongst some of the lowest across all our neighbouring authorities, even though we continue to offer a chargeable bulky waste collection, which will always impact on our landfill. Madam Mayor, there has been a delay in the new waste strategy being produced as it's a meaty piece of work, and in 2020, as a result of the pandemic, our focus was on ensuring our teams could continue to deliver our frontline services, which they did. Our weekly black bins, our green waste, emptying our litter bins, keeping our grass cut on our parks and open spaces, and much, much more. And I will never miss an opportunity to thank our frontline workers in 2020, how they worked tirelessly through difficult conditions, and they continue to have made improvements throughout 2021. I will listen with interest.
Patrick Harley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Listening to the debate tonight, it is absolutely rank hypocrisy for a petition politically driven by the Labour group. When you look back at 2016, as has already been said, the only party that has ever brought anything through Cabinet and to full council to charge for green waste was the Labour Party. Now, our proposals were born out of the fact that we wanted to put an extra almost £2 million into those frontline services to make this borough better. More on roads, more in regeneration, so we can get the people out there who can go out and get those grants, get that funding to really move regeneration on at a pace that we've not seen before. And as I've said, more money on roads, etc. And that has to be paid for. So you have an administration on this side of the chamber that instead of continuing to salami slice services, as Labour did, we were looking to invest an additional £1.9 million. And that had to come from somewhere. And unfortunately at the time, that would have been charging for green waste. And then, as Councillor Shakespeare has mentioned, we had a very early Christmas present. Frustratingly, but very gladly received. And each year the budget settlement seems to get later and later, because I can remember, as a backbencher, debating budget proposals from either administration in late September, early October. But these days it seems to get longer and longer, Madam Mayor, which is frustrating. So once we had that additional funding, Madam Mayor, we were able to say that we no longer needed to charge the green waste collection. But if you go back to 2016, Madam Mayor, and look at what Labour proposed, unlike our original proposals, which was an enhanced service and the retention of the weekly bin collection, Labour's proposals 5 or 6 years ago were to charge for green waste, offer no additional collections, and more importantly, to scrap the weekly bin collection. Once again, salami slicing services, introducing charges, and cutting back on those frontline services. That's something that this side of the chamber simply hasn't done. And we've continued to invest on those frontline services that make this borough an attractive place to live, work, and a choice of destination. Madam Mayor, the people that have signed the petition, as Councillor Phipps said, will have done it with the best intentions. Yes, we do need to look at the waste strategy, and we will do over the coming months and years, look at that, and as the government produces its report into waste management, we will look at that carefully and decide what we do for the people of this borough. But let no one be under any illusion here, Madam Mayor. This petition, first of all brought by Mr Tromans, and then he's been very unelegantly dumped from presenting that petition. This petition is nothing more than a political stunt by the Labour Party. And I must say, Madam Mayor, it's a stunt that I think has backfired, as we've already announced we won't be charging for green waste. And I didn't even have the sense to change the wording of the petition, quite foolishly, in my opinion. And I'll just end with this, Madam Mayor. At the last but one Cabinet meeting, it was the opposition spokesperson, Councillor Shakespeare's opposite number, who incredibly said in Cabinet that the Labour Party did propose charging for green waste, but took the moral high ground by withdrawing it. No, you didn't cancel us out through you, Madam Mayor. You withdrew it because she got beaten in a vote in this chamber by a combination of Tory and UKIP councillors. No moral high ground at all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Harley. Councillor Sue Ridney.
Mayor, when the news first broke before Christmas, became apparent to the public that there was a proposal, and you're saying there wasn't a proposal, but to say that green waste was going to be charged for, my inbox went absolutely berserk. As you can imagine, Cosley felt again that they were being picked on, simply because we'd already had the loss of Anchor Lane tip, and my point tonight would be a plea. Please can we go back to the negotiating table? Please can we reopen Anchor Lane? Because it's not just us as Labour councillors in the north, your own candidates, that's the first thing out of people's mouths when they open the door to you. What are you doing about the tip? When we're going to have the tip back? So I've got to say that's what's needed and that's what people want. But when this news first came around and people were discussing it, we were asked, what we're going to do. If we can't put green waste, we can't do our recycling, what are we going to do? And we didn't have any answers for them. We didn't have any answers for them because we're not getting that. We're not getting any movement on a different recycling. I mean, Stourbridge, and I know there are members of the opposition that think it takes 15 minutes from Cosley to Stourbridge. Even me on my broomstick can't make that, I can tell you now, as I've been accused. But that just doesn't happen. That just does not happen. What we need is a new recycling and access to Anchor Lane. My plea to you from the people of Cosley, let's stop all the dumping of fly tipping that we've got because nobody can go there. The costs that people can't afford of hiring a skip. I mean, you know, a skip is over £100. People can't afford to pay that. Please, please, go back to the table with Wolverhampton and get Anchor Lane reopened. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No. Councillor Chris Barnett, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to commend Andrew, actually, for bringing this petition, or for starting the petition. He had very personal reasons for not being able to present it tonight, and so I'd like to commend Kat for taking his place. It was very good of her. I'll start with the green bins and charging for them, because yes, it's true in the past a party in this chamber might have suggested that it be charged for, but the latest party that suggested that is the Dudley Conservatives. The thing about it is that it's not unusual, and many other local authorities do charge for the green waste service. And I know this very well because I came from Bromsgrove. I lived there for a long time, and then we had exactly that service, and they changed it while I was there. They changed from the sort of service we've got now to that green waste service that was paid for. The difference there, I think, because it was not popular. It really wasn't popular with the public at all. There was a lot of public feedback about it, but the simple matter is the Bromsgrove Conservatives had some conviction in what they were doing. It seems that the Dudley Conservatives don't. That additional funding that you were handed on a plate at Christmas, why didn't you put it into the other services then? If you were so convinced that the green waste, charging for the green waste service was the right thing to do, where did your conviction go? Why didn't you get on with it and use that money that you were given to improve services further? Or maybe it wasn't your conviction, maybe it was pressure from the Dudley Labour Party that caused you to have a screeching U-turn on your green waste charging. Regarding the bags, the recycling, I like to do something with a few facts and do a consultation. In my consultation, I got 116 responses, which I think is probably pretty par for the course with Dudley consultations. And I can tell you 86% of people don't like the bags. 86% of people would rather see a service that involves a single wheelie bin. And I am well aware of the issues of commingling. I know all about commingling. This doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't think of another service. I can tell you what, go and talk to the people on Cops Road in Netherton about the bag service. I have to tell you, when I ran this poll, it was on one of the windy days we've had recently, so I suspect that sort of enlivened some more people to get involved. If you go up Cops Road on a windy day, it happens to be a recycling day, you don't need to pick up the bags, you just need to pick the stuff up out of the street because it's everywhere, and that's why people don't like them. It's no reason not to think of a better service. So please do tell me, on the U-turn you made on the green waste service, was it simply pressure from the Labour Party or a lack of conviction in your own proposals? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You've got exactly 1 minute 23 seconds.
Very, very quickly. First of all, I want to take issue with Councillor Phipps, because I actually think politics is better than making a number of personalised attacks at the move of a petition, knowing very well that there is no right of reply. I think we can do better than that within the council chamber. I want to talk about, I'd like to thank Councillor Shakespeare for a very honest contribution with regard to the pressures and the challenges of being the Cabinet member and around the proposal for consultation that then, following events and additional money that comes in, means that you can revisit that. I recognise, both as leader and as various Cabinet roles, that position within that. And I thank you for articulating to us the role of being able to have that second look when additional early Christmas present, I think as the Leader of the Council said, comes forward. What I do want to concentrate on is consultation. Councillor Bevan obviously doesn't understand consultation, because what it is about people power actually signing petitions and bringing them forward. But what I do want to do is ensure or encourage the Conservative Party basically to have a little bit of look of internal discipline for the future, so that we can actually consult openly and honestly, because I think it was Councillor Phipps that mentioned Facebook pages. You will be aware of several of your fellow councillors. I will not name them. I'm unsure.
Councillor Lowe,
okay,
your
I'll just finish
time
by
is up.
incompetent or well, okay. They know who I'm talking about.
Thank you very much indeed. The 30 minutes allowed for the debate has now expired, so the petition will be referred to the Cabinet Member for Public Realm, Councillor Shakespeare, so it will be landing on your desk for you to deal with. Thank you very much to Cat Eccles for bringing that petition. Thank you very much. Right. What's going on? Okay. Okay, settle down, everyone. As we now move on to agenda item 6, which is the reports and recommendations. Council Plan 2022-2025, I call on the Leader.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Seconder.
Madam Mayor.
Does anyone wish to speak? No, I call upon the Leader to reply. Okay, all agreed? That is carried. Capital Programme Monitoring, I call upon the Leader.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Formally seconded, Madam Mayor.
Call on the Leader to reply. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I have got Councillor David Stanley.
I was hoping to speak on the last item, but I missed it by a few minutes by the sounds of it. What I'd like to speak about is page 17, the Brierley Hill Heritage Action Zone. In 1871, a recognised firm called Marsh & Baxter's moved into Brierley Hill, which is very significant for the amount of people they employed, etc., etc. But they also held royal warrants at the time. This is a company which was recognised throughout the whole of the world for its products, along with other people in Brierley at the time, like Hills and Smiths were made the gates and railings for Buckingham Palace, and of course the notorious, of course, Round Oak Steelworks. But Madam Mayor, what I'd like to concentrate on tonight is prior to 1966, Brierley Hill was an urban district council, and it was during those days when Marsh and Baxter's were at the forefront of their productivity in producing sausages, pork pies, black puddings, which were well renowned. And the point I'm going to make, Madam Mayor, is quite simple. In recognition for a company which employed so many people in Brierley Hill at that particular time, that when we're spending this money, perhaps recognition can be given in some shape or form, notably a memorial plaque or something like that, indicating the position in Hill Street in Brierley Hill where this company actually worked from. So Brierley Hill paid a lot of industrial and also heritage to this great borough of ours. So perhaps when we're spending this money, we could look at showing some type of recognition to one of my former employees who, no doubt, you know what I mean, were turning in the graves to what happened to the company at the end of the day when the Fat Stock Marketing Corporation got their hands upon it. But I won't proceed with that because I may get myself into a liable situation. But the most important thing is that people that contributed to the life of this great borough of ours should be recognised in some shape of another. And a company like Marsh and Baxter's, which is so recognised throughout the whole of the world for its famous products, should have some type of recognition when we're actually doing something in Brierley Hill to recognise where they actually started and where they actually finished and what they actually, the amount of people actually employed as a result of doing so. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Stanley. Can I call upon Councillor Judy Foster?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I refer to page 9 of the Capital Programme Monitoring Report, paragraph 18, stalled and derelict sites. Madam Mayor, following last week's Cabinet, at which I asked for an update from the working group, I've now received a progress report from them, which includes the list of sites, and I want to thank officers for the work that they've done on this. The sites put forward by councillors and others have been assessed and prioritised in order of, I quote from the report, where public sector intervention has the greatest potential to buy stalled and derelict sites to market them. So, of the 5 sites I have forwarded, 4 have made it to the top 20, and I welcome this. But what I am concerned about is that no community impact has featured in determining priorities. So please could I ask that community impact be incorporated in the work being carried out by the working group as one way of ensuring that the views of residents whose lives have been blighted by many of these dreadful eyesores are taken on board.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Ian Kettle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to speak on the Red House cone on page 9, item 17. A couple of years ago, Madam Mayor, we had some terrific storms and an awful lot of water got into the cone, and we had to shut it on the grounds of public safety. And after inspecting it, we realised that we needed a special survey, and it took quite a while to get hold of the specialist surveyor from Stoke. And although it's been a bit protracted, I'm delighted that the surveys have been done and the recommendation to maintain and look after the cone has been taken on board. And we found the money to look after part of our heritage, which apparently, I hadn't realised how important it was. It's probably the only one in Europe. And that makes it indeed very special, surely. So I would like to express my thanks that the resources have been found to safeguard the future of the cone. And thank you very much to the...
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mohammed Hanif.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking on capital monitoring, CCTV on page 21. Madam Mayor, I am aware, or I'm fully aware, of the installation works on phase 2, which were completed last year on these cameras in Lai. And I'm also fully aware that the cameras have been operational for almost 12 months or so. But for ongoing monitoring purposes, I am struggling and really struggling to get any updates from the control room or the team as the number of fines and enforcements that have been issued while these cameras have been up for fly tipping, antisocial behaviour or any other purpose. I have requested this data several times during the past 6 months or so, and not received a response to my emails. Can I ask the Cabinet Member for Housing and Community Safety to arrange for these requests to be met, and let's look at these results. What are they? It's not just simply having cameras there sticking on our lampposts and things. Let's see what the results are, and let's enforce and move on from there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hanif. Councillor Simon Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hope I haven't gone too early and I can't answer any more questions that are put after me. But firstly, on the Red House glass cone, absolutely right. I'm sure the former Cabinet Member put lots of effort into that one as well to try and make sure that we recognise just how important that historic site is. And just a cheap plug, please go down and visit and have a look at the various different craft outlets that we've got down there. We did a little bit of a kind of music and beer and food sort of festival in there not long ago. And the people that work at the Red House Glass Cone and the people that are within the tourism service are really trying to come up with new ideas to be able to make sure that that is a real good destination to visit. So I'd highly recommend it to everybody in the chamber, everyone in the gallery, and the 2 people watching at home. Next up, on community impact assessments. So I absolutely agree with the need to ensure that we measure the impact that these projects that we want to be able to regenerate, small sites that nothing's been done with for a long time, derelict buildings that have been there which should have been brought down years and years ago. We do need to make sure that we are targeting our resources in a way that's going to make the maximum possible benefit. When it comes to endless reports and assessments and things like that, though, sometimes I do think that we should just start to draw the line. Community impact assessments, who better to advise about what sort of impact a project will have on the community than the people in this room? You know, a lot of our officers are local people. They have that knowledge and insight. We have that knowledge and insight. And I'd rather be able to turn around and take some political decisions to say, this is where we're going to target our efforts into making the most difference for our communities. So the Stall and Derelict Sites project is something that's very, very important work for our administration, because there's been places that really have needed that attention for a very, very long period of time that was just not forthcoming under previous administrations. So I'm glad that we've got that off the line, and I'm glad that we're starting to see it pay dividends in communities around the borough. So thank you very much.
Concur. Everybody go down to the cone. It's got some fantastic little craft outlets and nice places to eat as well. Can I call upon Councillor Laura Taylor-Charles, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in response to Councillor Hanif's question, I'd be more than happy to get that information. So if you want to forward that across to me, because maybe you haven't been asking it of the right officers, so happy to point you in the right direction, and we can get that information across to you.
Can I call upon the leader to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very briefly, because I think the Cabinet members have got up and I think responded appropriately, but Red House Cone restoration, stalled and derelict sites, CCTV, largest ever investment in CCTV, commitment from this side of the chamber. We're delivering. And you've only got to look at the suggestions put forward by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, which would mean more dither, more delay. Madam Mayor, on this side of the chamber, we deliver. As referenced Councillor Stanley's suggestion, couldn't agree more. And we're already seeing, if you like, some of that respect and homage paid to people who have contributed a great deal to our borough and community in years gone by. For instance, the new wine bar and bistro will be Brooks Bar. And a couple of years ago now, I was there where they unveiled a plaque in King Swingford. I think it was Thomas Webb Glassmakers, which Councillor Stanley will know a lot more about than me. So it is important that we pay homage and respect to those people who have contributed so much. And I think the naming of the new wine bar bistro, Brooks Bar, is a great tribute to actually the person who's responsible for the building that we're sitting in tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Agreed.
Aye.
That is carried. Dudley Council Pay Policy 2022-23. I call upon the leader.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Formally seconded, Madam Mayor.
Speak. No. Nobody showing. I call on the leader to reply. All agreed? That is carried. Annual review of the Constitution. I call upon the leader.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Anybody wish to speak?
No indications, Madam Mayor.
Right, thank you. I call on the leader to reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All agreed? That is carried. Section 141 Policing and Crime Act 2017, Review of Cumulative Impact Assessment Policy 2022. I call upon Councillor Karen Shakespeare.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
No. Anybody wish to speak?
No indications, Madam Mayor.
Right, I call on Councillor Karen Shakespeare to reply.
I just wanted to add a little bit here. So this was first introduced following a request from West Midlands Police in 2006. It was just a little bit of background I wanted to give you. Due to the type and density of the licensed premises selling alcohol and providing late night refreshment in Stourbridge Town Centre, thereby increasing the risk of serious problems of nuisance and disorder arising outside or some distance from those premises. 6 weeks consultation took place in September-October. We had responses received from police, public health, Councillor Barlow, thank you, and a local residents. All responses received were in favour of retaining the cumulative impact policy. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Shakespeare. All agreed? That is carried. Review of Gambling Policy, Statement of Principles. I call upon Councillor Karen Shakespeare.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Does anybody wish to speak? No.
No requests.
Call upon Councillor Karen Shakespeare to respond. All agreed? That is carried. Deployment of resources, housing revenue account and public sector housing capital. I call upon Councillor Laura Taylor-Charles.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. Right, I've got a number of people who wish to speak. Councillor Jackie Cowell, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Reference paragraph 4 and the budget consultation. I understand that it has been confirmed that this was only undertaken with Housing Board and not DEFTRA as the official tenants' representatives. Paragraph 31 again references working with tenants and residents, but due to the failure of participation, tenants and leaseholders have no voice. Non-council residents are not affected and should not be involved in consultation unless it relates to an adjoining property or estate. Can the Cabinet member assure us that the situation with participation and consultation is being addressed? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Got Councillor Adam Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It would be remiss of me not to contribute on this report. Whilst I absolutely understand and appreciate the situation regarding the funding of the housing revenue account, I wonder if the Cabinet member for housing would agree with me that in the midst of a cost of living crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen for many decades within this country, if ever, the extra financial burden being placed on our tenants by a 3.99% rent increase for many couldn't have come at a worse possible time. Councillor Taylor-Charles will be aware of the recent tenant involvement and empowerment survey included in the draft ARC consultancy report produced in response to the Housing White Paper, which illustrated that on every single question asked, this council was below benchmark, in some cases miles below benchmark compared to the average social housing provider, a situation which mirrors the feedback from tenants in the 2018 STAR survey. Put simply, we're asking Dudley Council tenants to pay more for a service which in some respects they feel is poor and not improving. In addition, and in echoing Councillor Cowell, I wonder if Councillor Taylor-Charles would agree that effective consultation is part of good governance. Section 4 on page 162 makes reference to consultation with both the Housing Board and DEFTRA. I understand members of both these bodies have raised concerns about the nature of the consultation undertaken. The Housing Board in particular is concerned it is becoming a box-ticking exercise so that consultation can be seen to be done on housing finance and other matters. Can Councillor Taylor-Charles commit to ensure these two bodies are provided with the necessary information and support they require to carry out their role in good time, and that consultation with them is a two-way, constructive relationship? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Taylor-Charles to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Cowell, the tenant participation is massively important. You're absolutely right. I would be very keen to know which parts of the consultation DEFRA are claiming that they haven't seen, because if they haven't been given any information, then I would be very, very keen to pick up on that and make sure we follow that through. So if you could provide me with the specifics, then I'd very much like to follow that through. Councillor Aston, you're absolutely right. The cost of living is really going up, and it is going to hit people right in their pockets. The problem is that in the same way we will be discussing council tax next week, we have to provide a service for our tenants, and unfortunately the cost of that service is also rising. So whilst people are struggling with their finances, I'm sure that they would also still like their repairs to be done, and they would also still like their homes to be maintained, and they would also still like their neighbourhoods to be a nice place for them to live. And we're also looking at improvements to that as well. So not only are they going to be receiving a bog standard service for the rent that they pay, they will see improvements within their lives, which will only go to improving everything about them. The ARC consultation was disappointing, to say the least, not only in its results, but largely in the participation of that. We did do quite a bit of work around that, but unfortunately received a very minimal response. So I'm keen to make sure that we really push in the future to improve that level of engagement with our consultation process. We are committed to improving the service. You were present during the scrutiny committee, which we went through this in great detail. And we will be feeding back to the scrutiny committee on how those improvements are taking shape, because it's massively important for us to do that. Again, in terms of consultation, effective consultation is incredibly important with our tenants. Both DEFTRA and the Housing Board are voices for our tenants, and they are loud voices for our tenants, and they are really important to us. And I'm very keen to make sure that they really are being consulted. Again, it goes back to my point to Councillor Cowell, that if there are specifics where things have been missed, that I would really like that to be brought to my attention for us to address that. Thank you very much, both. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is that all agreed? That is carried. Invitation to become an opted-in authority, public sector audit appointments. I call upon Councillor Steve Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendation of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Anybody wish to speak?
No, Madam.
Is that all agreed? That is carried. Treasury management, I call upon Councillor Alan Taylor.
Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Audit and Standards Committee be approved and adopted.
Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Alan Taylor to reply. Okay. Is that all agreed? That is carried. We now move on to agenda item 7, notices of motion. At this point, can I remind members that under Council Procedure Rule 12.5, the maximum time allowed to deal with the notices of motion is 30 minutes. If the notices of motion are not dealt with within this period, they will be referred to the next ordinary meeting of the Council, and so on for the next decade. 7A, the impact of austerity. Now, at the Council meeting on the 11th of October 2021, Councillor Pete Lowe moved the motion in his name as set out on the agenda. The motion was seconded by Councillor Sue Ridney. An amendment was then moved by Councillor Steve Clark and seconded by Councillor Laura Taylor-Childs. The wording of the amendment is also printed in the agenda papers. That's your little yellow book. For the avoidance of doubt, the debate is now on the amendment. And can I invite any members to indicate if they wish to speak on the amendment, starting with Councillor Steve Clark. Yes, you may.
That point. I did raise this with both the legal officer and the chief executive on the 24th of November. They advised that I brought it up for your deliberation, Madam Mayor. And there's certainly no question with regard to the amendment that Steve has put forward. It's really a question in line with 14.6 of the Constitution, which I will read, is that the amendments to motion must be relevant to the motion and will either, point 1, refer the matter to appropriate body for consideration, to leave out words, point 3, to leave out words or add others, or point 4, to insert additional words. As long, it goes on to say, Madam Mayor, as the effect is not to negate the motion. The reason I raise it as a point of order is that I believe it's fairly clear to any reasonable observer that the intent of the amendment is to negate the meaning of the original motion. Like I say, it's no disservice to Steve because I understand why he would wish to raise that motion, but the point that I'm raising is that it is actually the absolute opposite. Whilst we praise, they criticise, where we criticise, they praise. And my concern, Madam Mayor, is it sets a very dangerous precedent, because what it would allow in future is, in effect, any wording to be amended with any words ad infinitum, because it would mean that nothing would, in interpretation, negate. So my request is that the amendment be ruled out of order, and if it is not ruled out of order, on what do you rely that allows it that it hasn't been negated? Thank you very much. Just for the record. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Hello, I'll just... yeah. Right, thank you for that, Councillor Lowe. I mean, obviously, I was not aware of that, but I do believe that you were given advice by the monitoring officer in writing, and that we should, and it has been considered, and that we can continue with the amendment as printed.
Just to be clear on the point of order, because I would really... Yeah, the... response to the 24th of November was, as it was a potentially political issue, it would be a matter for the Mayor to determine. Hence why I'm asking for the determination on what grounds does the amendment not negate the motion. And I'm raising that question so it can be a matter for public record, so precedent is not subsequently set.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Lowe. I am guided by the monitoring officer, and it is my view, following the consultation, that we will allow this amendment to continue.
It's absolutely your judgment, Madam Mr. President, that means that we can amend at will. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so can I call upon Councillor Steve Clark, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and with that, Pete, I will address some of your concerns then within this. You asked us to recognise the impact of austerity in the borough. And yes, our own council alone has seen resources fall over the last 10 years by about £100 million. But then you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. Now, how did this happen? How did this all happen? And what were the choices made during its recovery? Now, it happened because the Labour government created a deficit, which, as I'm sure you all know, the deficit is the difference between the government spend and what they get in taxes. In which case, the deficit that was left behind was £150 billion per year, which would cripple any government. The Labour government went from a 3% of GDP to 10%, and it took 10 years to repair the damage caused by Labour to get to a manageable amount of 1.2%. So yes, we have had less money to spend in Dudley, but now the deficit is down, we're economically far stronger. So back to my second question. Choices. What were the choices of Dudley's Labour administration when they were in control? When money was at a premium? What they did was they decided to put a new IT strategy together, which cost the council £3 million. Then within 2.5 years, we had to scrap it. The whole lot, eventually costing us nearly £4 million. You decided to bring in the consultants to tell us how to save money in the borough without delivering any savings at all. The opposition decided to take the government handouts to pay the council tax. But had you only put that up 0.5% throughout, I would not have to be putting up the council tax as much as I am now, had you done your job in the first place. These guys opposite didn't even have a procurement policy. They were happy to let contracts just roll over year after year without examination. Staff were queuing up for voluntary redundancy and then coming back to work as consultants in local authority. They wanted to move to fortnightly bins, as we've discussed earlier. Bin collection and charge for green waste. That was over 4 years ago. You can see how Labour operate their rubbish collection in Birmingham and Coventry, with rubbish piling up and strikes. We had weeds everywhere because you tried to save £80,000, but it cost double that to sort out the problem once they became uncontrollable. And throughout, you blamed the government for not having enough money. The Labour PCC is doing this now in Birmingham. The previous one, happy to spend £139 million on refurbishing the head office whilst closing all of the local police stations. Now, we offered £250,000 to help pay for PCOs, to help him and to match fund. He refused it, and he's blaming the government for not giving enough money for police on the beat. These are the choices. Over the past 10 years, the government have done their job in cleaning up after your national policies failed. You let the people down in the choices that you made. Last May, the people of Dudley made their choices, and this May, it'll be no different. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Dan Bevan, please.
Madam Mayor, I join you in the chamber this evening following a full day of teaching. On my journey over here, I mulled over some of the discussions that would take place this evening and the potential discussions. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would be required to deliver a lesson. Although I am appreciative of the small class size opposite. I would like to start with homework. It would appear that once again, Councillor Lowe has failed to do his. I think, Madam Mayor, it's becoming clear that there is a case of collective amnesia from the party opposite. In 2010, when Labour were in government, Alistair Darling was very clear that austerity planned by Labour would be like nothing the nation had seen before. On this side of the chamber, we're often held responsible and accountable for the actions of our leader Boris, quite frequently, may I add. Perhaps it's time to lead by example. Councillor Lowe's motion to ban fire and rehire tactics has an element of irony to it, don't you think? Tactics that Keir Starmer once referred to as against British values are now being employed to keep things afloat over at the Red Table. Labour are now recruiting staff on temporary contracts with weaker employment rights than its permanent workforce. This from the supposed party for the working classes. Since 2018, this administration has managed the finances locally and with significant result. Allow me to start with investment. Madam Mayor, we find ourselves in Dudley at a time where investment has never been higher. Our administration is delivering £570 million worth of investment into regeneration. Does that sound like austerity to you? I implore the members opposite to look around them. The Metro is well underway. A magnificent milestone for our borough. It will give us in Dudley a link. It will give us in Dudley a link to the rest of the United Kingdom, beyond the West Midlands, and excitingly, a direct route to HS2.
Well said, Dan. Well said, Dan.
Perhaps a school trip around the borough is in order. This site that the Hippodrome currently occupies will at long last be utilised. It is to be replaced with a university campus, promoting jobs and, importantly, education. My own town of Halsowen has seen the refurbishment of our leisure centre. Left to the cohort opposite, it would have been closed. The work of Councillor Buttery and Councillor Phipps has seen free swimming for children in the borough continued throughout this half-term. Duncan Edwards Leisure Centre, 18 million. Does that sound like austerity to you? I'll continue. Councillor Barlow's hard work on the Healthy Start initiative to support the parents of young children in putting food on the table for their families. The Shape Up for Life programme to support Dudley residents' fitness goals, again delivered by this administration. Does that sound like austerity to you? We have a track record of delivery. Meanwhile, here at Austerity Towers, once again, Labour are late to class and they've got the wrong textbook. It's a sign there's an election around the corner, Madam Mayor, as the opposition drag themselves to the chamber to talk about austerity. Nothing better than hearing it from the founders themselves. I look forward to Parents' Evening on the 5th of May, where the working classes will give their report on the cohort opposite. Madam Mayor, I will not be supporting the original hypocritical notice of motion, and will instead be supporting my colleague's amendment promoting the continued responsible finance management of local authorities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Quiet, please. Councillor Casey.
Congratulate Councillor Bevan on his speech, and by all means take him on politically. That's what we're here for. But when I
when I hear his age being used by a member of the opposition to try and put him down, age is a protected characteristic and it should not happen in this chamber. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kesey. Can I remind all members to treat each other with respect? Let people speak. If you wish to heckle, I would suggest that you put your button on to speak properly, and let's behave. We're not Parliament. Thank heavens. Yeah, we probably get on a lot better with each other as well. So, Councillor Ruth Buttrey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week, I had the privilege of going to Sycamore Adventure Play Area and seeing lots of very muddy and very happy children as we took photographs to launch our child-friendly Dudley logo, which has been designed and finalised by groups of children and young people, which I hope you've all seen on the Councillor Connect that's come out today. Why do I tell you this story? It's quite simple, really. Here on the Conservative benches, we don't just say we want our children to be happy and fulfil their potential, we do something about it. This year at budget, Children's have an extra £4.5 million over the next 3 years as we strengthen our early help services to work with families holistically and increase the pay of our frontline social workers who provide safety and care for our children when they need it the most, often in very traumatic circumstances. And this is thanks to my colleagues, to Councillor Clark and to the leader, for their judicious support for children's services and the way they have managed the budget, that we can have an extra 4.5 million in children's services. I would also like to put on record my thanks to the whole of children's services who have worked tirelessly and in the most challenging of situations over the last 2 years to keep our children not just safe but thriving as well. This administration is determined to keep on improving our children and families' opportunities as we raise aspirations and working with families, school and health to make sure that Dudley children have the very best that we can give them. If it's good enough for our children, we should have that same aspiration for every child in this borough. Perhaps, Councillor Lowe, your policy is to wring your hands and to bemoan the situation. Mine is to roll up my sleeves and to get on with the job and to have the ambition for the children in this borough, as we have shown with the holiday activity fund, free swimming, child-friendly Dudley, increased pay for social workers, strengthening our early help team, the aspirations of the health sciences university campus, the Very Light Rail initiative. This is what a Conservative administration does and achieves, and I fully support my colleague's amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
It was evening, I'm not quite sure. I gave notice, which has been given to the leader, the mayor and others. I'd like to move an amendment now, please, Madam Mayor. There's a copy of the amendment which has been made available to the opposition and to yourselves. If we can quickly whip that round. What I was going to suggest that if you wish to, you could stop the clock on this half an hour during that period of time. It's up to yourself if you wish to do that. I don't think you can constitutionally, but it's worth a try, isn't it? So yeah, it's just a matter of getting this paper sent round.
Councillor Crompton, we cannot allow that at this moment because we are still debating this amendment. We have to listen to the debate on this amendment first, then we take a vote, then we come to the original person who put the original motion in, which will be Councillor Pete Lowe, and then I would then read out, if that is carried, that the amendment has been carried, an avoidance of doubt, and I will read out the substantive motion. You can then, at that time, put in your amendment. Yeah. hang on, can you just sit down a moment? This is the Constitution. I hope every one of you have read it and understood it. You look at D14, 14.6, only one amendment may be moved and discussed at any one time. No further amendment may be moved until the amendment under discussion has been disposed of, provided that the Chair may permit 2 or more amendments to be discussed, but not voted on, together only if circumstances suggest that this course would facilitate the proper conduct of business and may direct the order in which such amendments are to be put to the meeting. So, only one amendment may be moved and discussed at any one time. We are now discussing that one amendment. Okay? Right, okay. If you wish to speak on this amendment, you can carry on, Councillor Crumpton. Right.
I've just listened to some sanctimonious claptrap coming out tonight. I was a Cabinet Member for Children's Services a few years ago, Madam Mayor, during which time, and at which time, when I took over that role, the Cabinet Member for Children's Services previously and yourselves meet as the new Cabinet Member for Children's Services, and you have to sign pieces of paper at that stage, which many other Cabinet Members don't have to do. Or at least that was the procedure when I was Cabinet Member. I was put in front of me the budget for Children's Services. The Conservative Party had been in control for quite a long time at that stage. And when I looked at the budget, I remember right at the end was the forecast outturn for that year when I became Cabinet Member for Children's Services. And the forecast outturn was a £3 million deficit in the budget for Children's Services. Out of that budget, which I believe at the time, there was an overall budget of around 90 million, but only about 9 million of it was not in the control of the Cabinet Member, but you had some leeway on how that money was administered. During that year, under a Conservative government, right, in the November, another £3 million was taken from the Children's Services budget when grant allocations were removed nationally from local authorities. That made £6 million out of a possible £9 million that was available. We also, at that time, as we still have now, have a huge problem with the number of children in care, and it has been an awful couple of years, both for our staff and for the children that they serve, to help them through this past couple of years. We do not yet know what the mental health impacts of COVID are going to be for our children. We don't really have any idea of that. We've had enormous problems for our staff in trying to deal with those situations, and I do realise that. But to be told that we're investing in children's services, we may well be increasing it, Madam Mayor, we may well be increasing it this year in this budget, but look how much has been ripped out of it over the past 20 years, mainly by the Conservative government, with their, not just their austerity measures, but their disgraceful behaviour towards Dudley and other local authorities. Have you not listened to the news recently, when it's shown that the investment in London and the South East massively outweighs all of the money which is spent in our sort of borough? And it is. And it has been mainly the Conservative-controlled governments out of the last, 50 years? There's been around 17 years of Labour government in power. 37 years or so of Tory governments in power. Why haven't they changed what we need in Dudley? Which is why, Madam Mayor, when I saw this amendment came through a couple of months ago, I could not believe that it was being put forward. It made a nonsense of the original motion. The ridiculous, actually, I think it's not illegal because nothing that happens in here is actually illegal. But the immoral way in which this has been taken forward, in that we have a motion which is put forward, and it will happen to you from now on, anybody that puts a motion forward is going to be able to change the absolute essence of that motion by the actions that have been taken in this chamber tonight. And I think that that bodes ill for the future. We've heard a lot about Councillor Vickers tonight, And I, for one, am sorry that I never took the opportunity to get to know him better. I really am. You know, he sounds like a really lovely man, and I do have great sympathy for you, Andrea, and for the family and everybody else that was friends with him. But I believe that he would have struggled with the way we've dealt with this. It's not the way we should be going forward within this council. We should not be amending motions just for the sake of it. Now, you're forcing me in some ways, Madam Mayor, by I put forward an amendment to this motion. I think it's a daft idea, right? But actually, we're forced into it because in some way... Yeah, I am for real.
Are you for absolute real?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Stop listening. Are you for real?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. I still have 20... hold on. You did say, Madam Mayor, can we not listen to what people are saying?
You're out of order.
I don't believe I'm out of order.
You owe Andrew an apology. Right
Why would I owe Andrew an apology?
You've just brought... You've just...
what I'm saying is that what he represented would not have been the way we take this
Apologise to
forward.
Andrea right now.
Andrea, if I have upset you, I would always
You
apologise.
want to apologise. Bang out of order.
Yeah. Yes, Madam
Sit
Mayor.
down.
Shut up.
Who are you talking to?
You.
Who are you talking to?
You.
Who are you talking to?
Yes, Madam Mayor. No, not much of it. Of course I do. Come to. Of course I apologise. Yes. Yeah, I apologise completely. And Andrea, I really do mean it. If I upset you, I did not mean to at all. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Jackie Cowell.
Madam Mayor, we have in recent years witnessed how critical the lowest paid workers are to our society in a way that has never been seen before. But those opposite and their friends in Westminster appear to have chosen to look the other way. While Boris partied and his mates enjoyed the fruits of their dodgy PPE contracts, council taxpayers were working on the front line. It has never been clearer just how much the haves need the have-nots. My ward is some of the most deprived areas in Dudley, and I want to see the residents of Quarrybank and Dudley Wood, and indeed across Dudley, get the services they need and should be able to expect. 25% of our borough lower layer super output areas are in the most deprived decile nationally. It's all very well talking about creatively and responsibly managed finances, but only the most financially stable and robust members of our society will be able to respond to that challenge. Those at the bottom will simply fall by the wayside. This is not a big international corporation, it is a local authority. Given the historically low levels of council tax in Dudley compared to our neighbours, limited legal and moral opportunity to increase them, and the low levels of reserves, excluding COVID payments, without government stepping up, we cannot support our residents as we should. Accepting the constant decline in government support without a fight simply cannot be an option. Those opposite benefited from the short-lived Boris bounce, and it is high time that there was a payback for the long-suffering residents of Dudley. You must tell Boris that he needs to spend less on champagne and cocktails and more on services and amenities desperately needed by our long-suffering communities. It is time to give back and demand a fair deal for the people of Dudley. It is not clear to me why the opposition would not embrace the undertakings in the original motion. The replacement wording is inward-looking and self-serving. It seems to be aimed more at impressing the bigwigs in Party HQ than responding to the challenges that Dudley faces. Accepting this motion, as currently amended, will be to abandon the hard-working citizens of Dudley and to turn our backs on their sacrifices. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Unfortunately, colleagues, the time's up, so it will be carried on to the council meeting on the 11th of April. Thank you. Right, okay. Moving on to agenda item 8. Where? No, that was the motions. Questions from members under Council Procedure Rule 11. Firstly, can I remind the Council that the purpose of this session, please, is for members to actually ask questions. There will be a 1-hour time limit on the question time session. The time limit on all individual contributions during this session will be 2 minutes. All questions will be dealt with individually, one at a time. If time permits, members may indicate to ask another question during the session. When I call on members to ask a supplementary question, this must relate to the original question or the answer given. Written questions. No written questions have been... Oh, no, that's the next one, isn't it? Right, can they go now? Right, Councillor Rebecca Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank the Council for its commitment to and follow through on the building of new homes on derelict land in our ward. Not only will these provide lovely homes for 5 families, it also shows promise that the Council is keen to utilise these areas and take them out of dereliction. Does the Cabinet Member for Regeneration commit to working within this type of work, especially in conjunction with our housing team, to provide high-quality homes and show that we are committed to our brownfield first policy?
Hang on, I got away with the fairies. Councillor Simon Phipps to respond.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First of all, I must apologise to the Chamber because I have made a bit of a mistake and I must apologise for that. There are actually 22 people watching on YouTube, not 2. So I thank every single one of them for participating, because it would be good if more people would watch, although I can understand why they don't. Anyway, so, Councillor Collins, thank you very much for the question. I pretty much said a lot of it earlier on, actually, in response to something else. The real importance is to try and turn some of these little grot spots around the borough, and we've all got them in all of our wards, and they're the bane of our lives, aren't they? You just think, can we just do something with it? And it's either somebody who's sitting on the land because they don't want to sell it, hoping to see if the value increases. It's somebody who maybe just doesn't have the means to be able to develop it. But we've got these all around, and the council should be someone who tries to actually propose a solution and bring forward that piece of land back into use. So I'm really glad that you're on board with that piece of work. All councillors should be thinking about where these sorts of sites are, and whilst we can't get round to everywhere, there are a hit list, so to speak, of all those areas that we're looking at right now based on the information we've got. And if we're successful, and if we deliver these regeneration projects, then we'll be able to use the receipts that are generated from using that high-quality housing either through private sale or through council house rents towards social tenants to be able to continue to deliver that sort of project going forward. So really glad you're on board with it, and yeah, it's an excellent project which I think is well called for across the borough. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Did you wish to ask a supplementary question? No, thank you. On Councillor Adam Aston, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've never stood up so much. My question is for Councillor Shakespeare. I wonder if Councillor... bear with me, Madam Mayor. I've lost me path. I know, my time's ticking away, Madam Mayor. Time's ticking away. Madam Mayor, my question is for Councillor Shakespeare. The people I represent in Upper Gornal and Woodsetton, which is in the north of the borough, had their ability to access the Anchor Lane tip in Coseley removed nearly a year ago. Don't worry, they were told. We'll get access for you at another local site. Now, almost a year since negotiations between this council and other local authorities, they still face an hour-plus round trip to Stourbridge. So perhaps Councillor Shakespeare or anyone else can confirm that a deal with a neighbouring local authority has effectively been abandoned, and that the pre-election pledges made by the controlling group to my constituents in Upper Gornal and Woodsetton, as well as Sedgley, Coseley and Gornal folk, have effectively been broken. Can I ask Councillor Shakespeare what she is doing to secure access once again to the Anchor Lane site, so that the people who live in the forgotten north of our borough can access waste and recycling services easily and conveniently, as it's incredibly important to them? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aston. Councillor Shakespeare.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, we continue to look at alternative additional provision for people right across the borough. In saying that, I would like to comment. I've just had the figures on the booking system that takes place at Stourbridge, and I have noticed that the numbers are increasing month on month of the residents in Coseley, Sedgley, Upper Gornal, Gornal, St James, Castle and Priory, St Thomas's, who are actually now using the tip in Stourbridge. And I have the figures here, and you're welcome to share them. And obviously the feedback that we are getting is that people, once arriving at the tip, are in and out. There's no queuing, so actually they're finding it a good option at the moment. But saying that, we continue to look at additional and alternative provision right across the borough. Like many authorities, we only have one tip at the moment. But as I mentioned earlier when I was speaking, we continue to work on our waste strategy, and that will include provision. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Aston, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
I do, Madam Mayor. I'm sure the booking system is as smooth as booking a suite at Claridge's, but the reality is people don't want to use Stourbridge because it's so far away. One of my constituents recently wrote to me in the wake of Anchor Lane being closed and then the announcement of charging for green waste. An announcement, the communications on which were incredibly poor, an announcement, the primary message of which was inextricably refuted by several members of the Tory group on social media. So does Councillor Shakespeare agree that whether it's what's happening at Anchor Lane or green waste, the way in which this council communicates bad news with its residents leaves a lot to be desired? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor?
I'm not quite sure I'd compare it with Claridge's, our booking system, or whatever, but having not been to Claridge's for ever, I think, actually. As I've already said, we'll never shut the door, and we will always be looking at options and other provisions within and outside the borough. So that is something we'll continue to look at. I'm not actually going to go back. We spent an hour talking about this matter not so very long ago. So I think all the questions have been answered. But as I said, we will continue to look at our provision within Dudley for all our residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shakespeare. Councillor Chris Neal.
Didn't expect that, sorry. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This has already been touched on tonight already. Firstly, a big thank you for listening to me and my residents in Upper Gornal regarding the need for CCTV camera. In Kent Street, as you know, can report it has now been sited, soon to be operational. Both myself and Councillor Westwood appreciate the work involved to fund this. My question is actually for the Cabinet Member for Housing and Communications. Over the past few months, we have had extensive antisocial behaviour in Upper Gornal. Obviously, this has caused concerns and fear in my residents Incidentally, a big thank you to council officers, police and the ASB team who have always been on hand to deal with my concerns. I would like to ask you, the Cabinet member, about the possibility of installing CCTV cameras inside the block in Pale Street or in the vicinity. I've had many calls and emails from concerned residents who do not want this to happen again. And I've asked again for the councillor to improve their safety. Could this be another appropriate site for CCTV for the much needed self-surveillance and safety of my residents? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Neil. Councillor Laura Taylor-Charles to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And firstly, I thank Councillor Neil for the work that he did around the really serious antisocial behaviour issues that have been going on in that ward. I think it really was a tribute to the partnerships that we've got across the board to have got that sorted really quickly. I'm really pleased to see such a positive response in your ward to CCTV and would absolutely commit to supporting an application for deployable cameras to start with around that area to make sure that your residents do feel safe. I've also welcomed recently the discussions that we've been having around locations for static cameras for possible phase 4. So it'll be really good to see where they go, and hopefully we'll have some good news in the near future for you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Charles. Councillor Ray Burston, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are we asking questions on scrutiny committees or just Cabinet members at this stage? Right, thank you. Thank you. I'm referring to the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee held on November the 15th, 2021, published on page 54, in which it states that 105 Dudley care workers were unvaccinated at that stage, although at that point almost all were booked to receive vaccines. However, data published by NHS England and published in the News Group newspaper showed that there were 124 fewer care workers employed by the borough on January the 2nd than during the previous summer. Does the chairman of the committee accept the probability that many of that number have since left the profession due to their opposition to the government's unnecessary enforcing of compulsory vaccination upon care workers? And furthermore, now that the Secretary of State for Health has published consultation that is but a smokescreen for backpedalling on this requirement, does the chairman consider it right that at the very least, the government and all those politicians who supported this measure should offer an apology to the estimated 40,000 care staff nationwide who lost their jobs as a result of being bullied and browbeaten into taking a vaccine that even so offers no guarantee that its recipient are neither incubating nor spreading COVID-19? More so given that neither the Scottish or the Welsh governments saw fit to enforce vaccine mandates upon their own care staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burston. I think it's Councillor Matt Rogers to respond as the Chair of Health.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've asked for the data sets to be updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to ask a supplementary, Councillor Burston? Okay, thank you. Sean Keaty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't expecting to be up this early. It's a question to the leader. It's hopefully a nice, easy one. We're sat here tonight talking about tips and green waste, while within our continent another democracy has been invaded and residential areas are being bombed and people are being killed. Will the leader join with me in condemning this brutal invasion of Ukraine and the suffering it's caused? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Scenes that we're seeing now on our television screens are absolutely appalling, and although there may be members in this chamber that are old enough to remember the last time a conflict like that happened in Europe, the vast majority of us have never seen that, and it's truly horrific. So I'm not looking at you, Ian, honestly. It's truly horrific, and let's just hope that the Ukrainian people hold out long enough for Putin's people to see what's happening and eventually turn on him and depose him, because like all bullies and dictators, the only end game is your own people in the end will rise up and overthrow you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. Councillor Damien Caulfield.
Madam Mayor, as Dudley's Armed Forces champion, I've got a positive report to make and also a quick question to the leader at the end, if that's okay. Madam Mayor, back in December last year as Dudley's Armed Forces champion, it was a great honour to join you in the Mayor's Parlour to receive on behalf of Dudley Council the Armed Forces Employer Recognition Silver Award for 2021. This was a national recognition of our commitment to our armed forces as a local employer here in Dudley. Madam Mayor, as you know, we weren't aware of the impending award for 2021 until the last minute, so didn't have a lot of time to put everything into place. I must thank all the staff in Kappa and in your office who worked with me to pull out all the stops to get this award for Dudley. The icing on the cake, Madam Mayor, was to have the award presented to us by our own B Squadron Royal Yeomanry, Captain Andy Peters and Sergeant Adam Sefton, both from Vickers Street. So to receive the Silver Award for our commitment to our armed forces and our commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant was truly an honour, and we're hoping to work harder this year to get the Gold Award. So can I ask the leader, Madam Mayor, that if he would stand with me, and we will commit to go that extra mile to do even more for our armed forces and veterans of the Dudley Borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Just commented on. I think we have a great debt of gratitude to our armed forces for generations and generations. It's not just about doing what we can for those veterans, sadly, who get less and less each year from the Second World War. It is about those veterans now who are now entering old age, who competed in more recent wars, like the Falklands, for example, who are now pensioners and are in need of help. There's a lot of mental health issues as regards to ex-servicemen with some of the experiences that they've endured. So the help that Councillor Caulfield mentioned, I think, is invaluable to our current servicemen and our former servicemen. So yes, we'll stand together on that and do what we can as an authority to make sure that when we have an armed forces champion, that's what we do, champion the rights and experiences of our armed forces personnel and former personnel. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Finch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also support what our colleague mentioned, but what surprises me, I'd like to know exactly what's being done from this council to do what's been mentioned. Now, as chairman of Gornal British Legion and a veteran, as our colleague says, of the Korean War, I do know there's still problems out there that ex-service men and women need. And as an active British Legion in Lower Gornal, we are active and we do deal with problems. But I've got to be honest, you know, I hate to be critical because I do know everybody feels so strongly about what's been going on today, because, you know, this happened in Korea when I was there. But I am surprised because, again, I must emphasise, we deal with people like I'm dealing with a particular person at the moment who was 92, was in the Korean War. And all as he wants, his dad, his son rather, he lived in Nimley Road, by the way, all he wants is some type of recognition of his service, you know, at this stage of life. And I cannot honestly say that this council helps the British Legion to carry out what they like to do. So basically what I'd like to, again, what I've mentioned is the cooperation must be there with all British Legions, and we're lucky in Dudley Borough area that we have some wonderful British Legions. If I can mention three, one is Gornal, one is King Swinford, and the other one is in Enville. They do great jobs as regarding helping the people, veterans. If I can bore you again.
I was listening to Councillor. I'm sorry, Ken. I think what you had to say deserved more than the 5 minutes. I really, really do. And I do think that perhaps that we could have some dialogue with Cabinet members, because we do a lot of good work in this authority with armed forces, and it was a very great honour to be given the Silver Award, and I think we're one of the few councils in the country for the work we do with veterans and ex-forces, particularly with housing. But if you feel that there is an issue, then I do think that perhaps we could probably go that extra mile. So, Damien, if you could make contact with Ken and we deal with that through that. I don't know who else wants to answer that question. Go on, Patrick. Yeah, Councillor Harley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Clearly, we do a lot as an authority to help our armed forces. They don't hand out these awards for nothing. So clearly, we do an awful lot as an authority to help our current and former armed forces personnel. However, there will always be individual cases, as Councillor Finch has mentioned. If there are those cases, and this is not just to Councillor Finch, but to every single member in this chamber, if you are not getting the right responses from the relevant directorate or cabinet member or whoever, then please bring it to, well, say first and foremost, the attention of our Armed Forces champion, Councillor Caulfield, and myself, because 92 years of age, we need to act and act now, not wait 2 or 3 years. So if there are individual cases, Ken, bring them to our attention. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No, okay, thank you. Councillor David Stanley.
Madam Mayor, it's just to confirm with my colleague from the opposition that both of us participate in the Royal British Legion Lower Gornal. As he rightfully says, he's the chairman and I'm currently the president of it. We have a meeting each month. We go through all the cases. We do as much as we possibly can to support and help any ex-service person. The only thing I don't need to say, when Councillor Finch said Enville, I think he was talking about Enville Street, Starbridge, and not Enville as Enville. And that's not to be rude with you, Councillor Finch, of course. But no, we do an awful lot, goes on completely unnoticed. We don't get involved with what's been spoken about in here tonight. We, as a local team, we just get on with it, give the support where it's necessary, and you know what I mean, I believe we do a good job between us. It's been very, very difficult over the last few years, as Councillor Finch will know, of getting the support in the branch to carry out the sales of poppies, etc., etc. It's not an easy task, it's an arduous task, which happens each year, and we get shorter and shorter and fewer in numbers. And I think that was the point Councillor Finch was trying to make tonight to this council. You know what I mean? We are there, we are working within the Royal British Legion, within Gornal, within Starbridge, and especially so as well, as quite rightly mentioned, in King Swinford. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Fairly direct question to the Leader of the Council, and it's on 2 points really. Firstly, would it be possible to arrange a meeting outside of this Council meeting with the Leader of the Opposition to look possibly at 2 points that I think would improve, from a personal perspective, the running of the Council? Firstly, as you will refer earlier on, with regard to the precedent of amendments to motion. This isn't a party political point, it's just about what I don't want to do is set a precedent where, in effect, any wording can be used on any motion, and obviously the appropriate advice given to the officers that I think have failed with regard to the assistance in that regard. Secondly, with regard to the White Book, I recognise why it was established, which is actually to hold the executive to account. It's a personal reflection, but what has happened, or what has evolved over time, again understandably, is in effect the time being filled either with supportive statements for the Cabinet to answer, or indeed critical statements for the basically to make party political points from either party. And I don't make that as a political point. So could maybe the Leader, with the Leader of the Opposition, take that away and look towards a better way in order that we can utilise that last 60 minutes in order to do what we intended it to do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Harley, to respond.
more than happy to have that meeting, and I think it's important to stress, although on this side of the chamber we are enjoying a very healthy majority, best one for 24 years for any group, any changes to our constitution I think should be agreed between both political groups, because politics being politics, we spend time in power, we also spend time in opposition. So I think it's important those changes to the Constitution are agreed on a cross-party basis between the two leaders or the relevant Cabinet members. So, yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Do you wish to ask a supplementary, Pete?
Just to thank the leader.
Thank you. Councillor Zarda.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, I mean, we ought to reinstate our regular meetings that we used to have pre-pandemic. And one of the things I think we should also add onto the agenda is some of what we've witnessed tonight. I know we've exchanged some emails on that as well, but I think it's important that what we've witnessed tonight, there isn't a repeat of that.
Councillor Harley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. More than happy to meet, but I think I'm more readily available than you are these days. So if you've got a slot in your diary, I'm more than happy to meet.
It is nice to see such friendly people at the end of quite a rather fractious meeting. And that's what it should all be about. As there are no further questions, so that completes the question time agenda. There is no urgent business, so that concludes this meeting of the Council. Thank you very much, and I will see you all next week.